expeditious, sound, and practical in caring for each of our students and parents during this opening period of time. And so, at this point, we are going to call our meeting to order, and we will seek to move through our meeting as clearly, concisely, and coherently as we can possibly do so. I call this August the 17th work session of the Lynchburg City School Board to order. And at this time, I would move to item B, which is our agenda approval. And in light of our adjustment of time, I would like for us to review the agenda. If there is anything that anyone believes we could deal with at a later time, I will be open to it. If not, a motion is in order to approve tonight's agenda.
I move that we approve tonight's agenda.
All right, Dr. Carter made a motion, seconded by Dr. Brennan, that we approve our agenda for the work session for tonight. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, if you would call the roll.
School Board Member Dr. Brennan?
Yes.
School Board Member Ms. Morrison?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Carter?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Coleman?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Nillis?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Sinhai?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Gupta?
Yes.
School Board Member Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
All right, we will stand now for our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now move to section C of our work session, and section C, one calls for us to move into a closed meeting pursuant to the Code of Virginia, section 2.2-3711A8. The school board needs to convene a closed meeting for the purpose of discussing the following specific matters: COVID-19 masking and vaccinations as permitted by the code in consultation with legal counsel. Is there a motion to move into closed meeting? Motion's been made by Ms.
Second.
Morrison, seconded by Dr. Carter. Any questions or discussion? All right, we will then ask the clerk to call the roll.
School Board Member Dr. Brennan?
Yes.
School Board Member Ms. Morrison?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Carter?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Coleman?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Nillis?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Sinhai?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Gupta?
Yes.
School Board Member Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
All right, we will now move into closed meeting, and we will go upstairs to our usual place.
Be downstairs in conference room 1.
Downstairs.
Downstairs.
Oh, we're going downstairs.
Your place has been hijacked.
All right, well, I stand corrected.
Do we need any of these papers? No, not really.
All right, we're going downstairs to the room that has been designated, and we do want to say to the public, we shall be right back. Thank you for coming tonight and for watching.
Woo!
waiting. Now would like to entertain a motion to come out of our closed meeting.
I move that we come out of closed meeting.
Been moved by Dr. Carter, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Millis, that we come out of closed meeting. And if there are no questions or discussion, quickly, Madam Clerk, call the roll on that.
School Board Member Dr. Brennan.
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Morrison.
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Carter.
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Coleman.
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Nellis.
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Sinhai.
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Gupta.
Yes.
School Board Member Mr. Harvey.
Yes.
Motion
Now,
carries.
I'd like to entertain a motion to move that the Lynchburg City School Board certify that in the closed meeting just concluded, nothing was discussed except the matters specifically identified in the motion to convene in closed meeting, and two, lawfully permitted to be so discussed under the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act cited in that motion in accordance with the Code of Virginia, Section 2.2-3712D.
I so move.
All right, thank you, Ms. Morrison. Make the motion, Dr. Brennan second. No questions or further discussion on the accuracy of such. We're going to ask that we would each certify. Madam Clerk, call the roll.
School Board Member Dr. Brennan.
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Morrison.
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Carter.
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Coleman.
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Nellis.
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Sinhai.
Yeah.
School Board Member Dr. Gupta.
Yes.
School Board Member Mr. Harvey.
Yes.
Thank you, Board, for the way in which we've conducted that. We'll now move to Section D of our agenda for tonight's school board policy discussion, and these are coming to us for first review. And so, Dr. Edwards, governance policy first review.
Okay, so governance group met on July 23rd. It was the administrative team that met along with Attorney Towns. And as you know, we want all of our policies to be reviewed at least every 3 years. So some of these are just up for a 3-year review. So I'll kind of go through them real quick, give you the summary, and you can see the strikeouts and crossouts on the policies. In alphabetical order, AA, school division legal status, is up for a 3-year review. We reviewed it, and we did not recommend any changes at this time. BDA, regular board meeting, school board meetings, is also up for a 3-year review, and no recommended changes. BDDCRZ, which is our agenda prep, is also up for a 3-year review. It's cross-referenced with BDDC. And again, no recommended changes. BCFZ advisory committees up for 3-year review, no changes recommended. CBD superintendent's contract and benefits up for a 3-year review, no changes recommended. CBB appointment and term of division superintendent, that's pretty much code, up for a 3-year review, no changes. CA, our administrative goals, we cross-reference with CBG, which the board looked at on July 13th, and there were no recommended changes, but because we looked at CBG, we wanted to make sure that that policy was still in line with it. CBA, another one that cross-references with CBG, and since the board recently looked at CBG, we recommended just one change from assistant superintendent to deputy superintendent, so the language would be correct. CBE is severances, cross-reference with CBB, no changes recommended. And then we already did that one, so that's not even on there. I think I hit them all. Questions?
All right, first review, reading, work session, any discussion tonight? All right, please continue to review these and be free to ask questions to administration where needed. D2, instruction and program policy updates in the same manner. Dr. Edwards.
Okay, and Ms. Pugh is going to take those.
Absolutely. The first 3 are VSBA updates. JFHAZ/GBAZ, prohibition against harassment and retaliation. That is a language change. It's changing status as a veteran to military status. JGD/JGE, student suspension expulsion. That is also a language change under drug offenses. Changing substance, imitation, controlled substance, or marijuana to substance or imitation controlled substances, as those terms are. And that again is just a language change. JHCDZ, administering medicines to students. They're striking language regarding the administration of medication to students. This is covered under our regulation JHCD-RY, administration of medication. So while it seems like they are removing that and that we do not have the ability to administer medication to students, that is not the case. We have a regulation which it is covered under. Striking the language, sharing, borrowing, distributing, manufacturing, or selling any medication is prohibited. And at this time, that is also covered in other policy. They are adding language regarding albuterol inhalers. The requirements are changing beginning January 1st, 2022. And so they are adding language regarding albuterol inhalers and valved holding chambers will be kept in stock in each school in the division to be administered by any school nurse. So this is a change in code and regulations, and so we need to add this in there so that we will be compliant with that when it begins January 1st of 2022. Any questions on those so far? All right, the last one is up for LCS review. This was reviewed in 2020. We're bringing it back again for further review. It is IIAA textbook selection, adoption, and purchase. I want to give a little bit of background here. So we currently have a textbook review process in place, which has been in place for many years. You all have participated in part of that throughout the years. There is a committee that is to review and evaluate the textbooks. We provide notice to the public that the textbooks are under review, and we post that on our website. We provide in-person opportunities for board members, community, students, teachers to review resources and provide feedback to you all. We also have procedures in place to consider and review those public input and comments. We also have established procedures and make known the criteria selection for the textbooks. And all of those things involve a variety of stakeholders. Up for review this current year, the K-12 Science and African American History. Currently, the policy reads that the school board will manage the review process and procedures that I just mentioned, meaning that you all would get the committee together, you all would provide notice to the public, you as a board would provide in-person opportunities, you would provide the procedures, etc. And we're making a suggestion, change in wording so that the superintendent or superintendent's designee would be the one to oversee that process.
Which is the practice that
Which is
we've
the
had in
practice that we
place,
currently do.
where you're still involved, and so is the community.
Right, so we're not changing any of the process that I just mentioned. We're asking to change so that our policy matches our current practice. Otherwise, as it reads, the board would be responsible for overseeing all that I mentioned.
All right, Dr. Brennan?
So, Ms. Yu, thank you very much. I think it sounds like a great idea. I wasn't sure reading through this, though, who actually, does the board still give the final approval for the textbooks?
Yes.
I couldn't see
Yes,
that
we
in,
do.
is that stated in this policy?
Yes,
or-
it is.
Can you show that to me? I just couldn't find that
I
statement.
believe so. I have to go back and review that. but
Okay,
I believe
if you wouldn't
so.
mind just in between now and the next meeting, I just couldn't
Sure.
see that.
I
But
will
that's still the
certainly do
idea
that.
that would come back to the board.
All the textbooks must be adopted. That's where your authority is. They have to be adopted by the board, so they end up on the board agenda for vote.
Mhm.
And we are also given guidance by VDOE, so we have to, there are regulations that we need to follow from them in terms of they provide textbook options for us to look at and review, and we need to stick with those as well. But yes, you
We always approve them.
you approve and accept the purchase of textbooks.
Thank you.
All right, any further questions on this matter? Again, going forward, I believe that we're going to make sure that our public, I know our public wants to have right information, and we're prepared to give them right information as it relates to what we're doing. Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Pugh.
You're welcome.
All right, well, we have now completed that, and we are now going to move into Section E of our work session. And the first matter is relating to LCS Community update. And so we're going to ask, during this segment, this may well have some link to this portion of the meeting, and we're going to ask Dr. Edwards to open us up, and then board members, we're looking for a very candid conversation around these important matters.
Okay, thank you. So this was formerly our Return to Learn section, but since there's so much more that we can talk about here, we call it Community Update to address some of the things that are going on in the LCS community. And we do have a couple things that we want to discuss tonight with you. I'm going to start with some of the questions that the board has asked, one being around enrollment. And now that we're back in person, what is our preliminary enrollment for the pre-K-12 as well as the virtual academy? And I'm going to ask Ms. Pugh to quickly give us that information.
Absolutely. As of yesterday, and again, this is K-12, they were not able to give me solid pre-K numbers, but I will get those to you. So this is K-12. This enrollment includes the virtual academy because those students are enrolled in their base school. The virtual academy is a program, and so those students are enrolled in their base school. But we have 7,699 is our preliminary enrollment. The LCS Virtual Academy enrollment is 239 of that 7,699. And I do have information on how it's broken down by grade and elementary, middle, high school, if you are interested in that.
In the big picture, I think we'd be
Yes.
interested.
Okay? In kindergarten, there are 8 students. In first grade, there are 13, 16 in second grade, 14 in third grade, 27 in fourth, 30 in fifth, 22 in sixth, 15 in seventh, 23 in eighth, 15 in ninth, 20 in 10th, 17 in 11th, and 22 in 12th. There are a total of 106 at the elementary level. There are a total of 58 at the middle school level, and a total of 75 at the high school level. Of those 75, 45, their base school is EC Glass, and 30 is Heritage. Of the 58, 18 are from Dunbar, 24 from Lincoln, and 16 from Sandusky. Bass is 5, Bedford Hills is 14, Darrington is 7, Heritage Elementary is 11, Lincoln Elementary is 17, Perrymont is 12, Paul Monroe is 7, R.S. Payne is 6, Sandusky Elementary 17, Sheffield 6, and T.C. Miller 4. And I'm happy to say that we gained 17 new students that are coming to us from outside LCS into the virtual academy.
And we can give that to you in writing, so you don't have to
Yeah,
write
okay.
all those numbers down.
So I will send this to you in writing, so you don't have to write all of that down. 7 of those new are elementary, 7 are middle, and 3 are high school.
The chair recognized Dr. Gupta to the point.
That's what I was going to say, if you could email, because I tried my best,
Oh,
but I
no.
missed your numbers.
No, absolutely, I will send this to you all. I can actually give it to Dr. Edwards, and she can send it as part of her weekly update.
Okay.
So that is our preliminary enrollment.
Okay.
Any questions?
Just
On that
the
matter,
total-
yeah.
I'm sorry, the total on the virtual academy again was,
239.
gotcha, thanks.
So what's your percentage dip compared to last year? 7,699 is how much percentage loss year to year?
I don't have that information, but we can get it.
Dr. Brennan?
Ms. Pugh, when you say 17 new students, does that mean students that are new to this area or have been other schools in this area
17.
come?
They are either were homeschooled and have come back to LCS, or they were in Campbell County and have decided to enroll in Lynchburg City Schools, or they are new to the area.
Okay, thank you.
And those numbers are what they are, and if they increase, but for me, when I hear the number 7,699, I see each of them individually, precious and powerful. And we're delighted to be able to work with each of them and as the numbers continue to move forward. All right, any other questions on that? Dr. Gupta?
Related to enrollment, the last Gulf School meeting, I asked them about the progress of diversifying our applicant base, and they say it's up to the Lynchburg City School to do that. So any point in future we can get an update?
Sure.
So how the pedal program is going, or maybe the LCS representative in Gulf School can update on a monthly meeting. So they have it on record, what is going on in terms of pedal program and how the application base is being expanded as a result of that. Thank you.
You have other items?
I do. Huh?
Yeah, now go right on to the next one.
Okay. All right, now that we got our 7,699 students back 5 days a week, one of the things that we want to talk about is enrichment and learning loss, and making sure that we are addressing any learning loss, any gaps in learning moving forward. So we wanted to talk a little bit about baseline assessments and some of the things that we're doing now, and then the implementation of best practices, as well as progress monitoring timelines and how we're going to be communicating out that progress as students, as we measure their growth over a period of time. And this is not SOL stuff that I'm talking about. This is additional data that we're using to really track our kids. We recognize that, you know, some of them did really, really well over the past year, and some of them are in need of some attention here and there, and some of them are needing some attention in many areas. So we want to make sure we get accurate data and move forward. So I'm going to ask Ms. Pugh to talk a little bit about that and give the board a picture of what to expect.
Thank you. So in terms of using data, we are committed this year to using timely data to predict student performance. We have various baseline assessments, which I'll cover in just a minute, to measure individual student growth, and we are focused on every child by name and by need. The reliance on local measures after non-existent SOL data, there's an incomplete data set from the pandemic, and so we're really going to, as Dr. Edwards mentioned, rely on those assessments that we have internally. Our first baseline assessment, which will be in reading and math for grades K through 12, will be by September 1st. So all of our students will have had an IXL diagnostic data, which will be in reading in grades 2 through 12, and then, math in grades 2 through Algebra 1. So I misspoke. The IXL is 2 through 12, not K through 12. But that will be done by September 1st. So we will have baseline data for every student 2 through 12 in reading and math. Other baseline data that we'll have, and I'm not sure if you are aware that the SOL administration is changing. It used to be a single administration at the end of the year, and results come in the summertime or in the fall when it's a little bit too late to use that data. We are now moving to through course SOLs for math and reading in grades 3 through 8 in September. So we will get a snapshot in September, and then in the spring we'll get another snapshot. The following year, it includes a mid-year assessment as well. We also have a kindergarten readiness assessment that's in September and October, which is a VKRP. We have another assessment in kindergarten, which is ESGI, and those are looking at some language. We have PALS pre-K to 3, and again, that's in September and October. Both Lincoln and Sandusky Middle School are going to administer math inventory assessment for school improvement initiatives to address the achievement gap in federally identified subgroups. Secondary English, all of our students in secondary English in 6 through 12 will take a diagnostic to get students' Lexile level, which is in reading. So we have a variety of data that we will be looking at over the course of the year. A lot of this is happening in the fall, but will continue throughout the year. Baseline data is going to be used to intervene on skill deficiencies, and the frequent data collection will measure student growth. So as I mentioned, we're really focusing on every child by name and by need. The implementation of a pre-K literacy program, which you all heard about earlier, which is the Foundations in Just Word, is going to be part of our best practice for instruction in the reading and writing. There are lots of hands-on STEM activities for students to do in their learning. We are implementing student learning goals to increase student and teacher efficacy. So students will be involved in setting goals and being aware of really what they're needing to work on. Curriculum instruction and assessments will be aligned to grade level standards. There are a variety of individual intervention and enrichment opportunities at the student's level. And then, as Dr. Edwards mentioned, looking at that data analysis at the school level, there's an expectation that that occurs at least every 4.5 weeks. And we will report to the board and the community every 90 days. And when we report to the board and the community, we're going to bring you the actual data. We're going to bring you the numbers, the figures broken down into subgroups so that you can see where the gaps are and where we're closing those gaps by school and across the division.
All right, that matter alone, we could talk about the rest of the night, but I think you can see that there are things in place that we can measure where students are and the work that we will need to do. Any discussion on that particular item? All right, you can move on, Dr. Edwards.
Okay.
Oh, excuse me, Dr. Nellis, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
There was a lot there. I guess, I mean, I appreciate the focus on groups, but I've always I guess I'll continue to emphasize we need to treat each student individually. And I know that's what we're really trying to do here, but unfortunately, there's a group focus that's imposed on us from outside. So the baseline data, have we used these assessments previously? Do we have experience with it? And are we really just focusing on collecting the baseline data for the fall now, and then going forward, or are we going to be looking at how the baseline data compares with previous cohorts of students?
We'll continue, we will do that.
The IXL will allow you to measure a child over multiple grades. So
Okay.
you will be, like, if I took it in grade 2, you can look back, when I'm in 5th grade, you can look back at everybody who took it in grade 2 and how they're doing in grade 5, and those kind of correlations. That's why we wanted to have some similar systems, and they do have chunks of time, unlike the SOLs, which are one point in time. So this will be new for us with the stringent reporting piece, but part of putting the reporting piece in is to make sure you're actually using the data, implementing strategies, and not just collecting data. So.
Thank you, Dr. Nellis. Ms. Morrison?
I also think that, Dr. Gupta, this will give us a heads up about students who we could accelerate in math, because that's one of the requirements for the governor's school, that we get students to a certain level. And if we find a student working above that level, then that will give us an opportunity to move forward with it. I like that.
Thank you, Ms. Morrison. So noted. Any further discussion on this matter? Once again, this is a biggie for us this year, and so we'll be continuously coming back to it. Next item.
Okay, our next item for community discussion is transportation. And we did these in order that we were planning them. So we were working on preliminary enrollment, learning loss, and then now transportation, which is a big one. So we are aware that we've had several issues since we've opened school with our transportation and our communication of those issues. So first, let me just say thank you to all of the parents who were patient, who helped out, who drove their kids to school, who helped families who could not get their kids to school. Part of it, and I will say part of it, is the bus driver shortage, which if you read in the paper, you'll see is a shortage in our neighboring counties. Even in Northern Virginia, they're experiencing some of the similar bus driver shortage. It was one of the reasons that prompted our school time changes and going into 3 levels of transportation, or 3 transportation runs. Part of our challenges also was with the software system that we were using and the upload and input data that we had in that system, and some of the challenges with what happens at night when it uploads or overrides. It was overriding some of the schedules that we were putting in. And then just basic manpower. If you look at how our offices are set up, our dispatchers are also excellent routers and they work on the system, but they also have CDLs and are required to drive a bus when we are short bus drivers. So one of the things that we noticed early on was during the day, especially in the morning and in the afternoon, the people who are working on this routing and double checking are driving a bus, and the people who would be answering the phones if they also had a CDL were also driving the bus. One of the biggest complaints that we heard from our families was we're trying to call transportation and we're not getting an answer. So early on, one of the things that we tried to do was use all of the administrative staff, which, by the way, thank all of you for bumping this meeting to 7 o'clock, because what that allowed us to do is Amy and Kim and myself and LaTanya and Ethel and my tech department, we all were working with the transportation department, answering phones and monitoring GPS from 3 o'clock until about 5:30, 6 o'clock to help them out because our dispatchers were driving buses. So we really wanted to put student safety first and make sure that we can cover that. And we've experienced a lot of challenges this week. The software company is here on site with us and working with us to fix some of these challenges. And then, of course, communicating it was probably one of the things that we could have done much better with our community. For me, a little bit was caught off guard when we were wondering, like, we could see things in our system, but parents were reporting that they could not see the very same things. So that was one of the challenges. But what I wanted to do tonight was just have the team here, the folks who have been working on it, just to provide a little bit of update. And then I want to shift into, all right, we know all that, but what are we going to do to be better? What can we look forward to in the coming weeks? What could we look forward to in the coming months? And then what is next year opening of school going to look like so we're not here? So I'm going to start with Steve and John, just a little bit about the technical issues, since they speak tech much better than I do.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So just a brief overview of what happened over the past year. So last year, when we were considering the hybrid schedule due to COVID-19, they, at the time, the Transportation Department and Administration looked at what was the best way to handle transportation. And at that time, the decision was made to switch from Edulog to another software company called Travel Tracker, primarily because Travel Tracker offered what they called a sandbox feature, where you could set up routes and kind of play around with things without having to put it out on the main system and whatever, which would allow them to develop routes around the hybrid day that we had, or week, where we had students attending Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, which Edulog did not allow us to do. So the switch was made. When the decision was made that we were going back to a full school day and week, they felt that the Travel Tracker would not work as well as Edulog, because with Travel Tracker, because we'd be switching everything completely again, we would have to rebuild the whole database from the ground up. Edulog, we had the database from a year ago, still in there. And so the decision was made that that was the best way to go, was to go back to Edulog for our routing services. However, that rollover did not go as smooth as what we had thought. That data was 2 years old. You know, every student moved up, all that kind of stuff. But also, when we changed the school day, or the start times, the bell times, start and end times, and because of the driver shortage, we had to do A/B routes and everything, and it was a pretty significant change. All of that, we still felt that we were, in pretty good shape. Due to lack of training, there was some human error. We were putting in bad data in some cases. But anyhow, all of that just kind of cascaded and culminated into a mess. But then, and to tell you the truth, we didn't know what we didn't know until last week. Anyhow, the other thing that kind of complicated things was we were directing parents to the Find My Bus app, and that is only good for in-zone students, and we have a significant number of invited students, which those people could not see any data at all. So anyhow, do you want me to go in now to things that we've been doing? So as Dr.
That's a quick summary, yes. Yes, a quick summary.
Okay. So as Dr. Edwards mentioned, on Friday, we contacted the software company when we realized that we couldn't straighten out the things that were going wrong. We were getting things where we were putting in data, putting in routes, putting students on buses and everything on one day and into the evening, and the next day we come back and all of that was not what we put in. It was all jumbled up. So we contacted Edgelog, and they were very kind and helpful and sent 2 people out here as of Monday morning. They arrived. One was here for 2 days. He's a consultant type fellow and helped us straighten out a lot of the problems, or at least get us on the way. The other is more of a trainer and technician, and he's been working through the system, showing us where we have bad data and how to fix it and whatever. So we've been working all week on all of that since last Wednesday. We've also had a great response from the administration building. All the departments down here have sent help out to us in transportation, just answering phones, calling parents, but also they've gotten on the computers and into Edgelog, and are starting to figure out how it works and what it does and all that. So we're getting some good cross-training there. We got a lot, like I said, we got a lot of support from down here, so there'll be some redundancy, some backup in the future. And one of the things we are concentrating on, obviously, will be training and redundancy, having more people than just 1 or 2 to do the work.
So let me just speak on the training part. So when you have the software system and you have people who are trained in actually using the software, we needed redundancy in that area. We needed multiple people who were trained and expert. You have one person who's expert, they're trained, but if they're not using it over a period of time, you're not that quick with fixing it, and that's what we experienced. So going forward, it's constant. It's a redundant training. There will be a lead person, but there will be multiple people in the system. So even if somebody is sick or absent or whatever the case may be, the rest can function at a high level, not at a, let me think if I can remember how to do this, level with that. And that redundancy is at the transportation building and down here. As Steve said, a lot of our admin staff from the various departments went down there and worked down there. And then also, we worked down here to do some of that. One of the things he did not mention is the GPS system for the buses so that we could locate the buses. And this is the area where we were triaging the communication piece. When you call into the transportation office, there's only multiple lines, so families were probably experiencing either a busy signal or just a phone to nowhere. Folks quickly realized that they could call downtown because we had more lines. So between the folks in my office who were fielding calls, we had a gigantic GPS system that we could see the buses, so we could see them in real time. So if a parent was standing at a bus stop and the bus was 15 minutes late and the parent did not know that, they weren't sure, did I miss the bus? Is the bus coming? And if they called in and said, you know, my little child is on bus 57, I'm here at this stop, we could look and see what bus 57 is, radio directly to the transportation office. And then we had people who were on the phones with the parents to say, you know, ma'am, stay there, the bus is up the street, it's coming up the street. So we had that in our office, but we did not have that in every office in the school buildings. So we are now made sure that we have that system in the school building, so it's not only the downtown folks who can see this, but the folks at the schools, because many people were calling the schools saying, where's my bus and what's going on. So that's one of those redundancies that we quickly fixed. I will tell you one of the big challenges with it is it's a GPS system. So it's based on that bus. But if that bus is in the mechanic shop and a different bus is out and we take the placard and put, let's say now this is the new bus 17, we just have to be aware that we just put a placard on bus 52 and made bus 5217 so that the people looking at it could communicate it. The other thing that was quite troubling, at least for my administrative staff, is they were calling in on the same lines that parents were trying to call in. So we didn't have a hotline for principals at all. And, you know, parents are with principals at schools, principals are trying to call transportation. They were funneling into the same backup that the parents were experiencing. So then we went in cell phone mode. So I have 2 cell phones. My secretary has a cell phone. We had office phones. Everybody had cell phones. So we took the principals out of the mix with the parents and put them more in with us between cell phones and email so that they could say to us, we have a parent here, this is a child, we could look for that. So going forward, we know we need a dedicated administrative line. When a principal calls transportation, we need them to be able to get in and get that phone line answered, as well as expanding the lines for the families that are calling in so that they wouldn't feel that frustration with that as well, with that. And anything else, I know I jumped into the tech zone.
That's fine. Well, just a couple of things looking forward, along with the phones and everything. As I said, the Find My Bus wasn't giving the out-of-zone people, students, their information. What we're looking at is another app that, so the Find My Bus app is tied to the address of the student. We are looking at an app that is more tied to the student where they're registered in school so that it gets the proper bus. So we're going to be getting that, and we're also talking with Edulog. They offer some other little apps. Maybe John can talk a little bit about that, but to help us manage and organize the routes and everything. Any questions?
We're not quite done yet.
No, we're not going to.
Okay.
We would love to just continue Dr. Edwards guiding us to hear what needs to be said as succinctly as you can make it, because I know there's quite a bit of discussion that the board would like to have.
Absolutely. So Steve alluded to the parent tools so that parents don't have to call in to say, where is the bus? So there is an app. But I will be honest, I'm not going to give you an app till I'm sure the data's clean. So I don't want a parent to have, I got it on my phone, it's telling me the bus is there, the bus isn't there. That's just more frustration. So the first thing we have to do before we issue the app for the parents is to make sure we have absolutely clean data, it's GPS accurate, and it can track kids. What the board and the community also need to understand that makes our system a little bit different than other places is we offer variety for our students. So as Steve was talking about the Find My Bus app, so if I live at, on Beacon Hill, if I live there and I put it in there, it's going to tell me what elementary school, what middle school, and what high school based on my address. But if I live in Beacon Hill and I go to the Go Center, that does not help me at all, because it's telling me that I probably would be going to Bedford Hills School. So it's not useful for the Go Center. It's not useful for schools of innovation like T.C. Miller, Dunbar, DESI, where they're invited students. It's not useful for students who have an IEP that says my program of service is not at that school. It's not useful for pre-K, which you would be going to multiple schools. It's not useful for Fort Hill or Empowerment Academy. So we have so many other schools for which we are pulling through the community, which, by the way, that does factor into why the buses get backed up and slowed down a little bit, that tool wasn't useful for, which means we were trying to hand schedule a lot of that and make it personalized for people. But when we get the app will be tied to the child tied to a bus, which really means we need families to make sure their Infinite Campus information is accurate. So that was something else that we ran into when they were like, oh, I don't live there anymore. And we're like, oh, okay, we still have you at this address. So we need to make sure that we have the proper address, or if they're going to a babysitter, we're not using the home address, we're using the proper address. So that, all of that is on the cleanup. The communication part was tough for us because we wanted to make sure we were communicating accurately. And I will say, in this area, sometimes when you want to communicate accurately, you tend to hold until you know the information. And the biggest lesson we learned is while we were holding, we were communicating. It was silent. And when it's silent and you're a parent and you don't know, that's a terrible communication. So if you notice what we tried to do over the weekend, because we were here Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, 3 a.m., all kinds of things. By Sunday, we were like, we need to do a 12 o'clock or 3 o'clock. We kept trying to hit the marks, even if it's to say we got one more school fixed or another school fixed. Because on the user end, even though we didn't have all of the information, we recognized the anxiety that people were feeling by not having our voice out there wasn't a good feel. So that we wanted to change that. And Ethel's team did a fabulous job, but we also wanted to put out information that didn't confuse people. So if I'm a zone school, this works. But if I'm going to the Go Center, it's different. If I have kids that are both zoned and going to Fort Hill, it was different. So we struggled a little bit with communication. We could have done much, much better with that, but we have learned a lot, and I just want to give Ethel a chance to jump in there and say some things.
Okay, good evening, everyone. As Dr. Edwards has indicated, there were a lot of things that we could have done differently. Our goal always in the Department of Equity and Community Relations is to communicate timely and accurate information in an efficient and effective manner. We understand that, as Dr. Edwards said, we understand better that silence is a form of communication, and waiting to communicate is not acceptable, so that will not happen again. The team has been at the Transportation Department taking phone calls, answering questions of families and employees, and even transporting students as necessary. I, along with the other coordinators of community relations, have shared our cell phones more widely. They're included on any press releases and our email signatures. Our receptionist here at the building has that. When we're out of the building, they can contact us. We're also working more closely as a team to ask the questions. How does every decision impact our students, our families, our employees, our community at large, and what needs to be communicated and when? We've provided updates more regularly, but balance that with over-communicating. What do parents need? They need the bus information, and Mr. Gasky has already explained how we put things on the website so that parents could access that information. When we realized that Infinite Campus had some information that needed to be shared with regard to the invited students, we put that information out there and also included the video so that people could access that parent portal. We'll continue to keep our goal at the forefront so that everyone has what they need in order to be successful throughout this school year.
Thank you. All right, now to the big thing, the bus driver shortage. And what are you doing about the bus driver shortage? So part of it is, you know, that for the last couple of years, we've been working on salaries. I think 2 years ago, maybe 3, this board committed to living wage. And we raised all of the salaries up to what at that point was living wage. I think it was $11.28. And subsequently, we keep raising the salaries. I had shared with the board previously a history of what we had done in transportation. It's not just transportation, it's other areas too, but we're focusing on transportation tonight. And what we're going to continue to do, we did have some success recruiting some folks. We should be getting a couple more bus drivers on board. Some of the things that we did was move 3-hour positions to 6-hour positions, 6-hour positions to 8-hour positions. We added VRS so that they would have retirement benefits. If you've ever seen our recognitions, you'll hear 40 years, 30 years, and they weren't getting retirement benefits. So now they're getting retirement benefits. We continue to try to compete with the surrounding areas who also have bus driver shortages in terms of pay. So we are actively working even right now to adjust some pay inequities, but also offer the full benefits package, which is another enticing thing that we would like to do. So we are actively working on that. The other thing is I shared with the school board just an organizational map of transportation, having spent some time down there and looking through the lens of the parent. One of the things that we noticed is, we're trying to run this during school hours, but transportation is not a school hour business.
Not.
It starts at 5:30 in the morning and it goes till 7 o'clock at night.
And later.
And later, hopefully not later, too much later
For activities.
for activities. But for the most part, by 5:30 in the morning, our dispatchers and secretaries are here. The bus drivers are coming in, they're getting their buses ready, and the bulk of LCS is not here. And then, of course, if you're standing at a bus stop and you want to call somebody, the bulk of LCS was not here. So one of the things we wanted to look at was how do we stagger staff so that we're covering it during the times from 5:30 to at least 7 o'clock at night. By 7 o'clock, what we're noticing on the GPS, with the exception of a few activity buses, all the buses were pretty much back in the depot between 5:30, 6 o'clock-ish. So we were looking at how can we reorganize things. How do we look at a management system that says there's somebody here at 5:30 who is ready to address if a bus driver's out, a sub shortage. Right now, we have the dispatchers trying to do some of that. So they're looking at the routes, they want to communicate with the bus drivers, but they're also responsible for trying to get subs. It's too much to have all of those responsibilities and then complicate that with, oh no, I have to drive a bus now. So part of what you have is just looking at somewhat of a reorg map, which talks about having 3 dispatch routers, because they do routers, that are staggered throughout the day. So if you look at the middle column, we got somebody starting at 5:30, somebody starting at 8, and somebody starting at 10:30 to cover through the 7 o'clock hour. But their main job is to just look at those routes and communicate with those bus drivers and make sure that the kids are covered. It's not designed for them to pick up parent phone calls. So right underneath that, you'll see the secretarial support staff, which is there during the same hours to talk to the principals, to talk to, sometimes it's kids like they're on their cell phones calling us saying, I'm just standing at this stop and I don't know if the bus came. So there's secretarial support for that. And then we also realized, in addition to scheduling for Fort Hill or scheduling for Empowerment Academy, we have to schedule for field trips, because right now all of our energy is going to getting them to school and taking them home. We also want to take them to basketball and take them to music and take them on field trips and things like that. So we need someone who's not distracted from the regular piece to do that as well. Most of those positions we had in our budget, and we just haven't had people to get in there, but we're a little more aggressive right now, with the exception of the secretary and then an office manager who also acts as a backup. If there is an accident, a bus accident, we absolutely want an administrator to go out to the scene. You don't want your dispatcher to have to leave dispatch to go out to the scene. So there's a little bit of redundancy built in there, but it will cover it. That's September to May. August, the first 2 weeks of school are always the most confusing for everyone. It is when you need the most amount of help. So during the first 2 weeks of school, what I am proposing, in addition to your regular secretarial assistance, you need some additional support in that office, because not only do we have, just the regular parent phone calls, we are experiencing either 2 or 3 or even the day of, folks show up to register their kids. They don't have a bus at that point. So we want to get them a bus as quickly as possible. We want our dispatchers and our routers to be able to do that. So someone else needs to communicate with the family. So you'll see there's like I called it a temporary secretary or something like that, temp phone support for that time at 5:30 in the morning when we first get going to 7 o'clock at night, so that we make sure we get the kids up into the school and get them moving forward. All staff in the transportation department will be trained on Edulog, and we'll have regular updates. So it's not just, I had a training at the beginning of the year, it's the end of the year, I don't remember any of that. I talked a little bit about the GPS, we talked about the phone lines. John is working to expand, as best as I can say, the phone lines so that we have more lines that get into the transportation department. And I think I covered all of the changes there, unless Kim or Steve or John, did I miss anything, Amy? Okay, I said a lot, I'm sorry. So just wanted to give the board that overview, and now we'll take whatever questions that you have.
All right, what we want to do is give board members an opportunity to share thoughts and reflections. Obviously, Dr. Edwards has been rolling up her sleeves. I salute you. We salute you for that. You've been leading with care to not push people out there and you be off somewhere else. You've been on the front line, wee hours in the morning. And we understand that, and others who have been having to double up their responsibilities and help get this done. At the same time, I believe that this board wants to stay out of the weeds, but at the same time, we want this fixed. So I would like to, I believe everybody probably has something to say, so if the pleasure of the board is we're just, could start over here, just each person. Let's just try that. Mr. Harvey, would you like to get started?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had the opportunity to see a lot of this in effect in real time and in person on Friday, and I just want to say I was just really, really impressed with our staff. Our drivers, our admin staff who was down there kind of filling in. You know, to me, the problem is we don't have leadership in the transportation department. But what I saw was we had people coming from everywhere, picking up the pieces and working together and trying to make the best of it that we can. I think we do need to make a major focus on our leadership in the transportation department. I like what I'm seeing here. My question would be about the temp phone support. I mean, they're a lifeline to our principals. I would hope we have people that are extremely skilled, not just the fact that it says temp phone support leads me to believe that we're gonna have a temp person come in for 2 weeks and try to be on the phone. We're gonna have someone who really knows what's going on to give the accurate information to the principals. There were a couple ideas that I heard on Friday that I think really do deserve to be contemplated some more. I think we need to talk with our bus drivers. I think our bus drivers are boots on the ground. The individual that I got to ride with was very professional, very knowledgeable, and I think had a lot of really great ideas of ways that things could be fixed, made a little bit better. Everything from as simple as being able to have a clock on their bus, where if the bus doesn't come with the clock, they can't add, because it's not a standard feature on it. But if we could do it division-wide, it could be considered a standard feature, so all of them could have a clock to be able to track things. Also, there are different types of GPS systems that we could look into having it on the bus. The way that things were having to be changed was, the bus driver's trying to drive the bus, the radio's going off and telling them about a student here and there and so forth. If they could have almost like a GPS system in the bus, the dispatcher could actually put that information in and then that would help them navigate their route, so they're not trying to sit there. The individual I was with, he's got a schedule that's written on paper that has changed multiple times. They came in early, they ran the routes before school, had everything in place, and then all that is constantly changing. And they were very flexible and on the fly, and those folks are working some long, long hours, and they're still getting their students where they need to be. I also recognize that our parents have a responsibility to make sure your kids are at the bus stops on time. Also, another thing, make sure that your kids, if you're in cars, make sure your kids are getting out of the cars as the bus is approaching. I saw instances where we approached parking lots, and kids were sitting in cars in parking lots, and had the bus driver not waited an extended amount of time, to the point where I was like, aren't we gonna go? He was anticipating these kids, finishing up their drink, getting their backpacks, then coming out of their cars before they even knew where the kids were in the bus stop. So, my hat's off again to everybody that has jumped in and sort of towed the line. But I think what this board needs to demand is we need this leadership in position at the transportation department, because it is not fair for our superintendent, for our admin staff, and everybody else to be here 3 o'clock in the morning when this person should be able to take care of that position, so.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. You certainly have the freedom to come back later. Dr. Gupta?
Thank you. Dr. Edwards, I appreciate what you have done, but the bottom line for the parents is the buck stops with you. We can blame the transportation director, we can blame the deputy superintendent, but at the end of the day, it's your responsibility. And I'm hoping we apologize to the community and to the parents, for I know it was a perfect storm what happened, it was beyond your control, but it should not have happened. And I'm hoping and assuming that it will not happen in the future. We are taking actions right now, and it's up to you, because as a board member, don't want to get into the weeds of what you should and could and would have done and should be doing going forward. But as I said, I appreciate you stepping in, doing two jobs, and you have your full-time superintendent job last week. So I don't want to say too much detail, but a lot of appreciation for you. The bottom line is we all owe an apology to this community for what has happened in the last 1 week. A lot of we hear only from people who are emailing, but there are a lot of students who don't email, don't even have an email. If you talk to those kids, those zip codes, they are left out, they may be sitting at home because the bus was missed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. Dr. Sinha?
Well, I was, a lot of what you went over answered many of my questions, and it is unfortunate. I think another thing that is a must in your protocols is to really proofread everything before it goes out. There were schedules that went out with obviously wrong times of day, and that's something that should have been caught. And I know how easy it is to do it, because I do a lot of output with big tables, and sometimes I'm just so happy that it ran and, didn't give me an error that I neglect to look, well, is it right? So, yeah, and there is a shortage. The Washington Post did a big story on it. It's school districts all over the country are facing problems. People got accustomed to shopping by mail, and so all the CDL drivers have been hired by Amazon and UPS and what have you, and then because of the pandemic, they didn't have their training. So a lot of factors have combined to create a real shortage of drivers. So that's not going to be easy to fix, but I hope we can be aggressive and creative in finding ways to solve the problem.
Thank you, Dr. Sinha. Dr. Nilles?
Yeah, I do want to thank everybody for their efforts. Obviously, it was a extremely rough start to transportation. Parents have high expectations. Certainly we do too. I guess I'd suggest, given the magnitude of this, is I think when things settle down, is to go back and do a lessons learned, look into what we did right, what were people's working assumptions in terms of software and transfer of data, and there needs to be a kind of a little write-up, short report, and kind of bullet point format for people to, because this kind of thing is when you start switching back and forth between software systems. We saw it with the financial system. It never goes smoothly, and it takes a lot of effort and a lot of work to work that, get through that. So, especially when we get some new transportation folks in here, I think they certainly would appreciate that. I guess to cut to the chase on, where are we in terms of getting the issues resolved? Are we at the 80%, 90%? And when do we expect to have things smoothed out into kind of a steady state?
We're all looking at John.
Normal.
Our tech guy.
No pressure.
I hesitate to give a date. One of our issues that you all have seen is that as we correct issues real time, we struggle to then communicate that information to drivers, to parents, to schools. And so while we fix some problems on the back end, we actually create other problems out in the community. So what we're trying to do is stage our fixes. So it means that the kids who are not getting to school right now, we're getting them to school. That's step one, is taking care of our emergency. We're considering those emergency things. That's highest priority. And then we're going through and doing a phased approach to make sure that we get safe services to other students. We're still doing the same thing. We're just trying to make everything is safe. Let me back up. But the goal is to then, if we have specific requests and other things that we haven't been able to accommodate yet, we're phasing those in. So we've been, just full disclosure, we've worked really, really hard the last few days, the first few days of this, fixing this problem, fixing this problem, fixing this problem, and not necessarily taking a holistic approach and saying what systemic issues do we need to fix so that we don't keep tripping on ourselves. It's one of the things the Edulog consultants have really helped us do. And we started that approach today, really fixing some of our major routes. One of the key situations that you all have probably heard of that confuses families is when we have a bus in the morning, bus 60, and then in the afternoon you get bus 54. And you go, why? Well, it's a great question. We don't know either. So we're fixing that. But obviously a big change like that has a big effect. And so we want to make sure that we are communicating accurately and quickly and effectively. So to your point about the writing the routes being on paper, that is in fact what most bus drivers have been comfortable with. We're absolutely looking at digital systems where we can automatically update them in real time, as well as principals and the building personnel and parents. Because if we communicate out a change, it's really important that everybody gets it. So it is a phased approach. One of the dispatchers today told me, he said, we will have this fixed by the end of the week. And I said, okay. I don't think it'll be resolved by the end of the week. I think we will continue to have issues just like we do the start of every school year. But I think the large systemic issues, I think those will be resolved in the next few days.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Dr. Nillis.
Thank you.
Dr. Carter?
A lot of what you said, you've answered a lot of my questions. One thing is, I'm seeing here this model transportation office, and it took you and the other staff to come up with this. We've had numerous transportation directors, and did anyone ever look at this to stagger the schedules? And if not, we can demand, and we do need a transportation director, but we need a forward-thinking person that's gonna take the time to develop something like this to make sure that we're looking at this staggered schedule to accommodate the needs, not just what we've been doing, because we've been doing it all these years. Transportation has been a concern, and now I see this is one of the best steps I've seen for a while. to really have the staggered schedule. And I'm so glad for the temporary phone support, because I think it's vital that the principals are able to get in touch with the bus transportation department, because that will resolve a lot of questions. And a lot of the parents they were frustrated because they couldn't communicate, and, you know, so many calls. But then there were people that were there answering the phones, but there were so many calls coming in, it was overwhelming. Someone was there answering phones, and I think there were 900 and some calls that they couldn't get to after answering probably that many plus more. But I also was able to go on a route with a gentleman by the name of Mr. Wilkinson, Gary Wilkinson. And at first I said, transportation, we just need to outsource this. But from riding on the bus with him, I just realized why we haven't done that, because he was aware of every stop. He was aware of every child, and he's been doing that route, and he knows all the siblings, and they're in different colleges. He knew all the parents, and every parent on that route, Bus 29, was so patient, so accommodating and appreciative, and they were talking to him, they knew him, and he was telling them that tomorrow we'll be here at a certain time. So they said, okay. And also, he knew there was twin boys should have gotten on that stop. But the other thing I noticed, that a lot of those stops, there weren't any children on the stops. It was at least 5 or 6 of them. And that may be because the parents decided just to drive them in, you know, until we get these glitches worked on. But I also want to remind everyone, this is just the third, fourth, fifth day of school. So, you know, it didn't go as smooth as we wanted it to go, but we have to remember this is initial starting. But as I think Dr. Nilla says, anytime you switch softwares and go back, and then we're a year and a half almost without really using that, so it brings a lot of concerns. But as long as we're doing that, just making sure that parents receive a call from us, because I told this one lady, mother, that we will return her call that day, and it wasn't returned, so I just feel bad about that. But we were doing all that we could, and I just really want to thank all of the administrative staff for just stepping in, and they did a wonderful job, and this is proof. This is awesome. This is one of the first steps, and I think when we hire anyone, we should just see if they are forward-thinking. Can they come up with something like this? This shouldn't take you and someone in deputy and all of those to come up with it, but the person that the transportation director should feel comfortable enough to come to you or to initiate a plan like this.
So in fairness, because I'm not gonna have any bus drivers yelling at me, that is the culmination of all the ideas that
Okay,
came
good.
out of transportation. Like, if you just talk to a random bus driver, they say, you know what we need to do? We need to have this. And we'd be like, okay, put that together. Dispatch had ideas. So it was the ideas, and there was a plan submitted by the previous director. There really was. So I don't want to get credit for something that I did not solely do. I think I can get credit for, I put them in the bubbles, and did it that way. But it really was a team effort in terms of a lot of these good ideas that you see came from the very people who are transporting our children. And I think that was one of the things that if the bus drivers are listening, they're probably sitting there saying, why don't they listen to us? You know, why don't they listen to us? We actually had a bus driver meeting. I'm losing track of days, but we just talked to them. And one of the things we said to them is, we want to meet with you before we go to the school board so that you're not learning about what you told us to do from the school board. I mean, we really want to value our bus drivers, not just as the bus drivers and picking up our kids, but they have bright ideas. And you see their bright ideas in paper here. So what we want to do is just help them fulfill some of the things that they have been asking for, and that we have not put in place. Some for budgetary reasons, and just some for they got lost in the crack reasons. But this really is the culmination of all of that team down there working together.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. Thank you, Dr. Edwards. Ms. Morrison.
Oh, well, thank you, Dr. Coleman, and I could echo what everyone else has said. I am appreciative. There's nothing scarier than being at a bus stop and not having your child get off that bus. Excuse me. I was at the EC Glass carpool pickup line the first day of school, and the bell was about ready to ring, and the lightning bolt shot down from the sky, and they held school for 20 minutes, which held the buses. that were going from EC Glass to middle schools, then to elementary schools. And it was just one of those things that, talking about a perfect storm. And then the next day, an ambulance pulled up with a fire truck, which, once again, we had cars that could not get in and out, and we were worried about the kids getting to the bus, and a lot of things contributed to it. But I do appreciate the parents that reached out to me, who said, thank you, we know there's a problem and you're working on it, but you need to get this fixed. And it needs to be fixed before school starts. It needs to be at least, I'd say, 2 weeks of runs. And I think that's very important. I would also like to add that I think second semester, when we start in January, you might want temporary phone help then as well, because the schedules tend to change and we have delays because of weather and things like that. So I think looking at it as when do we really need it? At the end, when you have schools dismissing early, what does that mean? I think that all is impacted by transportation, and that help may be needed longer than just the 2 weeks at the beginning of school operations. I am grateful for all of the school board members that got on buses. I appreciate it that you did that. I was not able to ride a bus. I did follow a couple of the buses, and I was very impressed with the amount of time they took before they let students get off the bus. It was student safety first, so thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Morris and Dr. Brennan.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman. I'll be brief because I think my fellow board members have outlined the problem so well. But I will say the one silver lining which has been pointed out in this is that every time Lynchburg City Schools hits a crisis, the cream always rises to the top. And I think this is just another example of that, of how hard everyone has worked, from the administration to obviously the bus drivers to the school staff, to help solve this problem. I think the only two things I want to comment on is that we all know that transportation this is not a new problem, that this has been going on for many years, and every year that we start, issues like this come up, but this is clearly worse than it has been, and clearly there are major issues that occurred that really should not have occurred, and I don't think there's really an excuse to that. We all look back and we say it was wrong to do, and we realize that, but there were other decisions that probably should have made. That all aggravated the shortage of bus drivers. And the only other thing I want to say is that I think, as Director Reeves was saying, I think the communication is such an important piece. There was a very, I think, appropriate article in the paper this weekend that talked about transportation problems that all school districts were having. And for Lynchburg City Schools to say would not be available for comments to this article, I think is just a shame. That we should be able to communicate not only to our families, which I think we are doing better. I got all 3 of the notices this weekend that talked about transportation, which is great. We have to communicate to our family and to our community, because they're our supporters also. So in this way, as I've said in the past, I just hope that this is kind of a reason for us to step up better with our communication and learn that we can do a better job. And I'm sure that that's what will happen with Dr. Reeves and her organization and our administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brennan. And I'm thankful for each of the board members sharing what you shared. And of course, if there's any further statements to be said, then they can be said. And as it has been stated, we are not an outlier. This is going on everywhere. But I do want to share some things. It'll take me a minute to do it. I was privileged to get on the bus, and Dr. Nillis, I'm ashamed to say this, but I don't know when the last time I was on the school bus. It was just one of the most meaningful experiences that I've had in my 55 years on the planet. All of those kids, they just look so sharp. Every stop, they look great. The little teenage elementary kids going over to Sheffield. And so I'm very impressed with the amount of care that families are investing in their kids. And they got on the bus looking like they were eager to get to school and learn. And the bus driver was exceptional in handling those kids and all of the protocols that go on. And so it was a great experience for me. All week, I have had so many people in my ear, and I try to relate everything to the superintendent, but I've had a lot in my ear. So let me just succinctly say, Dr. Edwards, this problem was here before you got here. And once again, my opening statements, I just respect you for your willingness to get in there. And I want to challenge every staff worker that's already working hard to carry their weight and not just leave it to a few. Programs don't change lives, relationships do. And you've got to be able to relate not just to the people in one department, but our division has got to continue to improve in how we relate to those who are in the transportation department. I'm grateful to hear an emphasis on listening, but let's be clear, that has not been happening. It may be happening now, but it has not been happening as it should. We've heard this before where drivers feel afraid to share their thoughts and opinions because of reprimands. That is not the character and nature of our current superintendent. But it's a problem. We talked about redundancies earlier, but we need to have redundancy in listening. And as far as I'm concerned, you can go get the Pope and make him or her the director with this model. And I'm impressed with it also, Dr. Carter, but this is going to stay on a piece of paper and get nowhere if we're going to slide ourselves into a little room and say, you can't talk to me. You go talk to somebody else, but I don't want to talk to you. And if we have people who are functioning and they are functioning in such a way that there's preferential treatment and mishandling of older workers and how we're going about equity and all of those things, it's not in my pay grade. I will leave it alone. But these matters have got to be dealt with in order for our transportation department to succeed. It didn't start with this opening school day. It didn't start when Dr. Edwards got here. It was going on, and it has to be fixed. And so what I'm most concerned about, Dr. Edwards, is how are we going to set up something to fix that? I've got page after page. I can tell you all about all these little things like I know what I'm talking about, Edulog and travel trackers and some of the things that wasn't said tonight, and I'm gonna leave it alone, that are some of the challenges that are going on here. But it has to be dealt with. It just has to be. And I won't rest until it is. I'm finished.
Okay. So I echo your sentiment. I think one thing that we saw was the value of presence. And it really does make a difference when you're there in it with them and not there standing over them. We were definitely trying to be side by side, understanding their jobs. It's kind of funny because I was trying to use the software and secretary just reached over and said, hey, look, you click on this and you can get it a lot faster. I was like, oh, all right, thank you. You know, that's what we need. We need those relationships like you talked about. We need the listening. We have a talented staff that have great ideas. And it was because the great ideas were already there that we could quickly put something together to say, if we pull this with this, we can make this work. And I'm happy to do that. I was very pleased with the number of folks who came out of their comfort zone, even when we did like late night bus buddies next day, when we realized that we did not want any kid on standing on a corner waiting for a bus. But we also realized the value of the bus driver paying attention to the road and not necessarily looking for stranded kids. The number of folks who came out and said, I haven't been on a bus in a long time either, but I will do it. And that included some of you as well. It was great. And I think they have a different appreciation for our transportation staff. They got to work with them. Some had special requests. Can I go back on bus so-and-so tomorrow? Which was really, really nice to see. So, you know, sometimes you have to be with the people you serve to understand the service. And I think, you know, as much as there were lessons learned in the transportation department, there were lessons learned outside of the transportation department. For us, that is going to make the whole, not just the transportation department, but the whole LCS better for that. So, and I think we're committed to doing that work here, as evident from my staff who camped out they're right next to the dispatchers, right next to the bus drivers, the bus aides, the secretarial staff out there, so.
All right, Mr. Harvey, then Dr. Gupta.
I'm reminded of something my grandmother used to always tell me: every time you point your finger at somebody, there's 3 more pointing back at you. It was said earlier tonight that the buck stops with Dr. Edwards. The buck stops with this board. It's us. We need to take responsibility. We need to apologize to our students and our parents. Apologize for our staff that they've had to endure some of the things that they've had to endure. So I think what I would like to have come out of this is what we as a board are going to expect, so that we can track to ensure that this is being fixed. So I would like to see if we can, just like we had sort of return to learn updates at each board meeting, if we can have updates on the status of our leadership in transportation, if we can have updates on how some of the items are being addressed. And I will share with the rest of the board, and I understand their precautions and so forth that some of us have. When I was getting off my bus, my driver asked me, and I really wish I could say his name because he was so incredible. But when I got off the bus, he asked me, was I gonna come back? Was I gonna ride again? And I'm gonna try to make a commitment that at least once a month I would do a ride along with him. And just to be able to let him talk to me. And so I would encourage all of us, if we can do that, to make that a case. We visit our schools. We each represent our school, a certain group of schools, and we hear from our teachers and our administrators at these schools. Let's also try to hear from our folks in transportation as well.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Dr. Gupta.
Wanted to bring 2 more things to your attention is about the bus stops, which are like more than a mile away for some of the parents. And some of the parents are complaining about the kids being left in school after the school time, and they're asked to pick them up from the school. And having said that, I agree with Dr. Coleman. I think the issue is the generational gap. You got older drivers and you got young generation drivers. So as you bring in the management, somebody is able to communicate well and talk to these older generation drivers, because they are the heart and soul of your operation right now. You know, and that's where the issue starts. And if they decide to retire one day, it'll be a nightmare scenario for us.
Oh, yes, go right ahead, John.
Just one thing about the bus stops. So the old system, and you mentioned it too about empty bus stops, the old system had over 6,000 unused bus stops, which caused a lot of automatic routing problems and tried to get us in places where kids were not or should not be. So our emphasis has absolutely been on safety and making sure that we get kids on buses. We've had a lot of stops, like you said, that are showing way too far. And I just got a report today from, it wasn't available up front, but I just got a report today showing us bus stops that were all too far. We also trained 2 additional staff today to just work on that problem alone. So we are addressing it. And then in the real world situation, I've got to give huge props to our bus drivers. And you all have all said it, but they have been rocking it. And they get out there and they know that kid's not supposed to be down the street, and they drop them off where they're supposed to. But it does cause confusion when people try to call the transportation department, who's supposed to know, and then we don't have the correct answer. So we are working on it. We're going to get that fixed.
Dr. Carter.
And also not to just blame others, but it's great. I think we need to do something with registration, to have some hard, fast stops regarding registration and the availability of buses. The bus driver that I rode with, Mr. Wilkerson, stated that at one stop, he was scheduled to pick up 1 child, 16 children got on. But that's great for our attendance, it goes up, but, so then the next stop, you pick up more, and then your bus may be full before you even get to all of your stops. So we may have to look at registration, how that plays into the transportation too.
All right, thank you, Dr. Carter. I think that signal there was an indication that we need to move on. At the same time, thank the board. Mr. Harvey, we hear your suggestion. This needs to be monitored. We have the utmost confidence in our capable superintendent, and you can see what is happening. But we've got to listen to those drivers and take care of them. We got to take care of teachers. We got to take care of drivers. They're real people with real matters, and I personally don't want to hear of anybody feeling mistreated, and I know that the superintendent will not allow any of that to occur. I also would encourage us to begin thinking now, budget time is coming up, and I'm hearing many of you talk about, we've got to do what we need to do for our teachers. We've got to do with our bus drivers. We're lagging $5 maybe or more behind the other local realities, and we have to figure out how to do better. And so, is the board comfortable with what has been said so far? I hope the public can understand that we are on this and we are working together, and we're going to get this where it needs to be. Dr. Edwards, anything else?
Yeah, two quick other ones that came to our attention. One is about Empowerment Academy and a virtual school, and some security issues that we ran up against. And Ms. Brown is here to tell us how she has quickly addressed that.
Good afternoon, Board. On August the 13th, I met with Ms. Jefferson, Mr. Board, and the SRO team to discuss the following safety concerns at the Empowerment Academy and virtual program. Security of the building and school designation, school access and access points, specifically the specified areas outlined in the MOU regarding spaces that LCS employees can use and the spaces that the businesses can use. So delineating between school program and then open space within the building. As a follow-up to this meeting, I met with Don Floyd from Facilities and Transportation and Maintenance, and also Mr. McCary and his office staff on Monday to discuss the following points. We discussed access keys for essential personnel, inclusive of all SRO officers, installation of internal doors and the Sonatrol system within the next month to isolate school programs. We're in the process of working with the glass company to get the glass doors cut for the internal doors so we can get those installed quicker. Making sure that the outer doors are locked to the educational programs at all time. Going through and we checked a couple of doors to make sure that staff are locking those doors and getting used to locking the perimeter on a daily basis. Also, we work with them to create signage to be posted that stated LCS employees only, and also no trespassing signs within the perimeter of our LCS space, as well as the doorways or stairwells that were adjacent to the access points of our programs. In addition, we made the recommendation to Mr. McCary and his staff to add signage on the outside of the building to designate where vendors, clients, or community should be entering the building in terms of services or other programs within the building, and then also the direction of flow for school staff, employees, or anything else that's school or program related for LCS. The last thing that we discussed were staff restrooms and parking locations. We reviewed that to talk about where was most appropriate for our staff to park. And also we talked about fire drills and other drills that we will be needing to conduct as a school division. So that was our first meeting, and we plan to have another meeting to follow up as well, to keep those things moving. So this is the first update in regard to the new location.
All right, thank you so much, Director Brown. Dr. Edwards, any further statement on that board? We all
Thank
clear
you.
You're welcome.
on that, and we're looking forward to monitoring those new placements.
Last thing, just a small thing, COVID. We just wanted to really update our board, our families, and community on our COVID-19 mitigation protocols. We are still here. Kudos to all the students and staff just came back with masks on. They were just so great. Our ultimate goal is to keep our schools open for in-person learning. And we do feel strongly, we were successful last year. We wore masks. Last year, we took mask breaks. We had mitigation protocols, and we want to continue doing that. And we're up against something different now with the Delta variant versus what we first experienced last year. But nonetheless, once again, our goal is to keep our students in school in-person learning. We just wanted to give you a brief overview. We are still using measures and metrics similar to what we did last year. The VDH and CDC have changed from 14 days to 7-day measures, which you can find on their website. We still have our positive cases in quarantine listed daily on our site. On the homepage, you can get that information. And again, our goal is to minimize any disruption. So if we find ourselves where we do have to quarantine, we're going to start at the lowest level of quarantine possible using CDC standards, trying to, if it's a classroom or a grade level or a wing of a building or just a building, I mean, the thing that we don't want to do is have the full division quarantine. We will be prepared to switch to remote learning, and here's where language and vocabulary is important. Remote learning is different from the virtual academy. The virtual academy is its separate program, has separate teachers, kids are already assigned to those programs. Remote learning is what we did in the fall in terms of using Google Classroom and Seesaw and working with kids. We had some ComTel units that we could have kids log into real time with their classes. So we're exploring some more of that. Should we need to quarantine a classroom or a school, or I hope we never get there with that. But Director Brown, do you want to talk a little bit about why our document is not going to be very, very specific on our website because the CDC keeps changing, and we want to be able to change with the CDC as they change a little bit of parameters. But do you want to talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing to keep kids safe and how we're going to do some contact tracing?
And so the health mitigation plan is updated and it's on the website. And you'll see a lot of links to the CDC website. And we reference the CDC and VDH a lot. We chose to go that route with the links because CDC is always updating their guidelines, and it's quicker than what we can update as a school division. So as a result of that, we met with the nursing team today. And we have letters that when a student or individual staff member is quarantined, we're listening to the community, we're listening to parents. They've asked that we send home something specifically with the length of isolation and quarantine, and then also the parameters around that other than just the school letter that we send out. And so we will be sending that notification out with that individual or that student for them to have as well. We usually do emails in addition and phone calls as well in regards to that. When we're talking about contact tracing, an example would be this year they changed the guidelines in terms of how we contact trace within the classroom. And so we're looking at 3 to 6 feet. So it narrowed down the area in which we would usually quarantine a student or an individual and looking at the time frame as well. And so as we're updating our processes and our plans, we're doing that, and we're going to try to do that in a quicker fashion to keep up with everything as it's changing. What we will keep consistent as of right now, we had started back in, I want to say March, April, we had switched to the 10-day of quarantine and isolation and followed the CDC's guidelines as of that time. We will continue quarantining if you test positive for 10 days, or if you are exposed and you are not fully vaccinated and you're less than the 3 feet for 10 days. Those individuals can test on day 5 through that medical personnel, and upon submitting that into the school nurse or the COVID email address, they can come back on day 7. And so we will continue that process for this school year as we're moving forward. In regards to what we are seeing right now in terms of positive cases and quarantines right now, it's only been the 2nd week of school. And so the numbers have been very fluctuating. And so we are monitoring on a day by day. So we are monitoring isolation individuals that test positive on a daily basis, and we look at 5-day trends for those. And we're also looking at quarantining of students and staff, and looking at that to monitor when to shut down a classroom, a location, or whatever it might entail, whether it's a pod for an athletic, football or soccer, or whether we need to shut down, say, for example, a play based upon the quarantine that might go on at that time. I would just like the board to know that we will have an assigned person to us from the Virginia Department of Health. I have a meeting with them tomorrow evening. But last school year, we also worked very closely with the Virginia Department of Health on an almost everyday basis for a while until we got our footing with contact tracing. And so just moving through that process, we would do our due diligence as we did last year to ensure the safety to the best of our ability for all LCS students, staff, and families.
So thank you, Director Brown, for giving us the status of COVID in LCS. And we always are grateful to Dr. Sinha, who makes sure that we have the charts in there uploaded into board docs of the status in the community. So you want to talk a little bit?
Yeah, a lot of the ways that I had been doing it traditionally, the VDH changed a lot of their data in the meantime, and I hadn't kept up with it. So I tried an alternative approach. And plus, yesterday was the day they were doing maintenance on their website, and so a lot of their graphics weren't even available till today. So I had to kind of scurry. But what I tried to do is give you the major information, you know, what the relative risk is, what the positivity rate is. You'll notice on, let's see, on the one page, I have hard copies here if you want to pass them around. There's on page 3, now the lowest level of geography I could get was the health region. So it's the whole southwest region, but it looks at cases by vaccination status. And what is glaring there is that although you can be vaccinated and get infected, you're not likely to end up in the hospital or die. So vaccinating is very important. And spread among vaccinated people still seems to be minimal, although vaccinated people can spread the virus. Right now, our transmission level is high. You know, we're approaching sort of some peaks like we were experiencing last January when the whole country was having a major surge. And then you could see there was a nice dip after vaccination started, and then Delta came on the scene. And then the last page is just for those who aren't aware. It's a broken up map of Virginia, but it just shows the health regions. And we're in that purple southwest region. So not sure how representative those hospitalization ones are, but they're consistent with national trends. Our vaccination rate relative to our neighboring counties is lower, which kind of surprised me. Gotta hand it to Bedford County, theirs is fairly high. Amherst, I'm gonna say it's because Sweetbriar required vaccination. They're doing their part, so, but anyway, so I'll try to do this for all of our meetings. It's a little bit easier for me to put together than what I was doing, and I think it's more comprehensive. But if there's any information on here that's missing or that you'd like to see, just let me know and I'll modify the report accordingly.
Ms. Morrison?
I have a question for Director Brown. We're getting information that a booster shot will be offered based on your second dosage. We, as a school division, offered that to our staff and employees last year. Are we prepared to move forward with that if that should occur?
If that should occur, we will work with the health department to move that forward quickly. And also, if a round of vaccinations come in for younger students, we will be prepared to also offer that as well.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Carter, then Dr. Gupta.
And following Mrs. Morrison's question, are there any, are we looking at now maybe staff or any employees who didn't get vaccinated? Are there any ways they can do that now through our nurses or in schools?
Yes. We will be sending out a survey. I apologize for being a little delayed in that. And in that survey also, we will capture those that right now that will qualify for the immunosuppressant booster shot. And we will capture that, and we will have that out by Friday of this week. So yes, we will be able to run some individual clinics along with the VDH is support to get those staff that want to be vaccinated, yes.
The ones that have never been vaccinated?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Dr. Gupta?
Knowing, last time school board members got shots as a LCS employee, but knowing that we are not classified as employees, will we be eligible for booster shots this time, the school board members?
So, Dr. Gupta, I would say what we did was anyone that serviced our kids or were on our campus that worked with LCS staff, we asked that we first took the priority of our direct line staff or direct people first within that, or the ones that were providing the services as our students were coming back by elementary first, and prioritize that. And then we were vaccinating others as well, and we would do that same process this year.
Dr. Edwards, of course, under your leadership, Director Reeves and Director Brown, as you all are continuously working with the superintendent and moving forward, I guess to Dr. Carter, Ms. Morrison, and maybe a few others' questions, the messaging, finding a way that it trickles down to parents, the message of the importance. What are the benefits to being vaccinated to that crowd that may not have been? What are the benefits? How does benefits and a message to try to encourage? Because somewhere in that whole process, we can pick up some more, because that just helps us all the way around. And I would encourage you all to put your minds together to think about how we can do that.
Yeah.
All right, Dr. Brennan.
Dr. Senior, thanks so much for the data that you always give us. It's very helpful. I would just say from the ground view, this is a terrible problem.
Mhm.
I mean, the hospital is seeing more and more patients. We have patients in the ICU who are on ventilators that are 50, 30 years old. We have people dying in that age. This is not like before, but it's a terrible thing, and there are more children being seen, probably because there's more, the virus is more transmittable, not particularly because the children are more vulnerable. They probably are not as we thought before. So I think this is going to be something we're going to have to face this academic year. And Director Brown, I'd like to go back to the question about two things. One is as far as our quarantine recommendations. As I said last time, the CDC is not very nimble as far as changing things, but several, a month or 2, 3 months ago, maybe they came out with quarantine recommendations that differ whether you're vaccinated or not vaccinated.
Yes.
And very simply, if you are vaccinated and you're exposed, you do not need to quarantine.
If you are fully vaccinated,
If you're fully vaccinated.
if you're fully vaccinated and you are exposed, we do not vaccinate you.
Quarantine.
I mean, excuse me, we do not, I'm sorry, it's late. We do not
You can
quarantine.
say that again,
So,
Director.
yes,
I agree with you.
so that is a true statement.
Right.
Yes,
So, I'm sorry, because you were saying before that what our quarantine policy was going to be, I assumed in general, was the standard policy from the pre-vaccination period, which is that if you're exposed, you can be tested 5 days, if you're negative 7 days, you can come out, or if you're asymptomatic at 10 days, you can come out. But do we have a separate policy for people who are fully vaccinated?
We don't
our
have,
students and our staff?
we don't have the policy because it fluctuates so often. We're following the current CDC guidance in terms of fully vaccinated and unvaccinated and the quarantine regulation for that. So if you're fully vaccinated and you're not showing any symptoms or signs, we're not vaccinating you. We're asking you to
Quarantine.
excuse me, I'm sorry, quarantining you. Whew, cut it out.
We know.
And so we're asking that staff member to monitor. And if they show any signs or symptoms, then we recommend that they seek assistance from their medical provider and get tested, if appropriate, by their medical provider at that time. However, if that person is unvaccinated, then yes, we will ask for them to quarantine. So,
Just to clarify, because I know it has been a long day for all of you, if a student or a staff member is fully vaccinated, and there's an exposure within the schools where they come into contact with somebody be positive for COVID, they do not need to quarantine. They are not going to be quarantined from the schools. And I won't drag that out here. My second point is that along the lines of communication, I think we need to communicate to the families in LCS what our parameters are for quarantining, what we're doing for physical distancing, what are the parameters that we do for mitigation that we did so well last year, and we're not talking to anybody about this year. And we knew this was coming, we knew this before the bus issue, we knew this was all there, and we're not doing a very good job of that. So I think I, as one board member, would like to see what the parameters are, what the quarantine parameters are, and I'd like to see that information made available to families. And I hope that we are following the CDC recommendations for fully vaccinated people do not need to quarantine if they're exposed. Thank
Yes.
you.
That's one of the reasons why we wanted to change it and put the links, because the CDC recommendations have changed and continue to change faster than we can print, PDF, and upload. So it's just a little simpler to do that. And as far as us, with our quarantine and our mitigation strategies, we can go back to some of the things that we did before. I mean, I did a video kind of explaining all of how that works in the school, how absenteeism either on the staff side or the student side affects whether or not we shift to remote pivot, I think it's the word pivot, to remote learning. So we can absolutely go forward and talk to families about that. And it's gonna kick in with the athletics and the extracurricular as well. They did change, as Director Brown said, now for K-12 in a school setting, you can have 3 feet, and the close contact definition has changed to be a shorter distance. So you might be able to get away if you were 6 feet away and if you were vaccinated. So.
All right, thank you, Dr. Brennan. That's very important, and we really appreciate it. And again, Director Brown and Director Reese, thank you all of the directors you're just giving everything you got, and we're appreciative of that. Dr. Edwards, does that conclude the community update?
That does conclude the community update.
All right, well, thank you for that, and we will now move on to the last item under E, which is Human Resource Report. Dr. Edwards?
Yes, and normally during a work session, we do not ask the board to conduct any business, except this Human Resource Report has a bunch of wonderful teachers who are waiting to get in front of our students. So we would like your approval so that we can not only fully staff our transportation department, we want to fully staff our classrooms as well. So one act of business.
All right, board, this is coming to us for action tonight. What is the pleasure of the board?
Move to approve the Human Resources Report.
Dr. Nellis has moved, with a second by Dr. Carter to approve the Human Resource Report. Any further questions or discussion? Dr. Gupta?
There is a last name and resignation typed up as Armstrong. The rest of the row is empty. I'm assuming that's a
Maybe a typo, let me see.
resignation or row, Armstrong. But there's nothing in terms of, you see that, or I'm the only one seeing it?
Right, there's nothing on that.
August work session one?
Right here in the after certified work session 52 kilobyte file.
Right, there's nothing else on that entire row but just Armstrong, comma.
All right, I'll check it out.
Under resignations.
I don't see it.
Under resignations.
I don't have anybody.
So, but how does that impact the validity of what we, what the motion on the floor is? Do we have the proper information?
The reason is if there's one more resignation, is that missing from this row?
Mine doesn't say that. I don't have any other.
I don't have any
Under-
resignation either.
I don't either.
Is that the August 17th?
I have it. It says
It's
resident, it
passed.
says Armstrong, and there's nothing.
Oh, you know, it's not the August 17th work
August
session.
17th work session?
Yeah,
It's the
This is-
February one.
Oh,
Oh.
yeah, that might have been.
this
way
is,
old.
this is the,
Yeah,
Yeah. Go to, click on the August 17th work session tab.
new way of,
Yes, it is a new way of quickly getting them,
yeah.
It's an active spreadsheet, so you need to be on the right.
right page.
Oh, okay.
yeah.
All right, thank you for that clarification, Deputy Superintendent Pugh. Any further questions or discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we're going to ask the clerk to call the roll. If you vote yes, you're in favor of the Human Resource Report. If you vote no, it means you're not.
School Board Member Dr. Brennan.
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Morrison.
Yes,
School Board Member Dr. Carter.
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Coleman.
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Nellis.
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Sinha.
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Gupta.
Yes.
School Board Member Mr. Harvey.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Right, thank you. Very good. And you see several informational items for you under F. This is a very active board. We'll govern ourselves accordingly as we move along and continue to be at the cutting edge of what it means to do work for kids in the best way possible. At this time now, we are in Section G, and the chair is recommending that the school board approve a motion to convene a closed meeting to discuss the following as permitted by the Virginia Code, Section 2.2-3711A7. And this will give us an opportunity to talk about the superintendent's evaluation process. Their motion.
I move.
Second.
I've been moved by Ms. Morrison, seconded by Dr. Carter. Any further questions or thoughts? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, if you could call the roll for us to go into closed meeting.
School Board Member Dr. Brennan.
Yes.
School Board Member Ms. Morrison.
Yes,
School Board Member Dr. Carter.
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Coleman.
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Nellis.
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Sinha.
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Gupta.
Yes.
School Board Member Mr. Harvey.
Yes.
All right, we want to thank the public. Our next meeting is September the 7th. We'll be delighted to hear public comments. Thank you for coming, and you can contact us at any time. We will now go into closed meeting. We'll recess for about 5 minutes to clear the room, and closed meeting should move along nicely.